If you love classic contemporary Christian music and the people that made it, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to help support us and keep us going. This is Stage Right, and I am your host, John Thorne. They say if you die with a handful of friends, you die a rich man. Well, I have several buses full, and I'm very excited to share them all with you. Welcome to Stage Right. I am your host, John Thorne. This is episode 39 today. So, in the life of my musical influences, you have heard me, if you've listened to the show for a while, talk about the Joe English Band, Sammy Hall, Mylon Lefevre, Truth, lots of other groups. All of those groups had a tremendously profound influence on me, becoming a bass player in contemporary Christian music. As a preacher's kid, you can probably imagine that I was really drawn to secular music because that's usually how it goes, most of which would later be categorized as classic rock. So I was a huge Aerosmith, Kiss, Pink Floyd, Uriah Heep fan. I loved Journey, REO Speedwagon, on and on. Then one day a friend told me, he was another preacher's kid, a friend of mine named Rocky, and he's like, you got to listen to this band. You got to hear this band. They're Christians. They got a great singer and they got a great album. You got to hear this song called Watergrave. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'm sure they're good. And we got to his house and he's like, come on, I want to play you that song I told you about. So he put on Watergrave. And the first time I heard Russ Taff, I was like, oh my gosh, like this guy's really good. Like this band is really good. So I started listening to Russ Taff and the Imperials, and it was amazing. They were the first Christian group to actually steal my attention from all the other bands, secular bands that I loved. And what was crazy about it is I loved to play guitar, so I would play my guitar to all the Aerosmith or Kiss albums or Pink Floyd or Uriah Heep. But when it came time to sing, I love to sing too. I was drawn to the Imperials, mostly because of Russ, but man, they had some great albums. So if you've listened to the podcast from the beginning, you already know how much I love Russ. But my love for the Imperials that started back in 1978, early in 78, my love for the Imperials continues to this day. Long after Russ left, I loved Paul Smith. I loved Jimmy Lee, Ron Henby. I have loved the Imperials. I listen to them all the time. And it all started because my friend Rocky, a fellow preacher's kid, thought I listened to too much secular music. So the other day I was getting ready for the show, getting ready to do my call for the podcast this week, and a message pops up on my computer from a good buddy of mine. So I call him, and he answers right away. So we start reminiscing and laughing and going down memory lane. Well, the thing about Richie is Richie was our live engineer in Whiteheart. He's a phenomenal live engineer. But the thing that made Richie different is he's also a phenomenal studio engineer, and the two don't always go together. Sometimes someone's really good live but not in the studio. Sometimes somebody's really good in the studio but not necessarily live. So in conversation, he said to me, well, do you remember where you and I met? And I'm like, well, absolutely, I remember when we met. And he said, when was it? Where was it? I said, it was in Houston, Texas. And he said, are you sure? And I said, I'm absolutely sure. And to make this story even funnier and to bring this full circle, Margaret Becker in Houston, Texas in 1990 was opening up for the Imperials, and Richie Biggs was mixing sound. How's that for some Stage Right synergy?
Hey Rockstar provides digital marketing software and services to generate more leads, more exposure, and more revenue for your business or organization. Let Hey Rockstar amplify your awesomeness.
So my guest today has been a successful producer and engineer for over 40 years, but he got his start as the drummer for Russ Taff and the Imperials, back with Armin Morales, Dave Will, Jim Murray, then later Paul Smith, Ron Henby, and Jimmy Lee Sloas. Mr. Tom Reeves is my guest. Tom, Welcome to my podcast today.
Oh, delighted, man. Thank you, John.
All right. So I want to start at the very beginning with you. How old were you when you first discovered music or music began to pull at you?
Well, I don't know about the pull. I mean, I've always listened to music. And of course, back in that day, we were listening to 45 RPMs and vinyl.
Right.
My mom and dad had a little stereo in the formal dining room that nobody could go into. And I finally talked them into let me go in there and listen to records. But really, it all started we had a fourth grade band in elementary school. And I wanted to play drums, and I always wanted to play drums. So that's what they let me do.
Right. Okay. So what was it? Was there anything in particular that made you want to play the drums?
No, that's kind of a funny question because, like when I was teaching high school band right after college, I had to do the elementary school band as well, and we went to the audition day. Of course, I'm 21 years old, my first teaching job,
Right.
and I went to the elementary school, and I had about 70 elementary school kids sign up for band, okay, for fourth grade band, and I got back to my office and opened it up, and there was like 50 of them signed up for snare drum. So, of course, we had to make a few adjustments there. But I think every little boy, for the most part, at that age, is drawn to the drums.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if it was any more divine than that, but I'm certain it was part of my story later on. But,
that is fantastic. 50 snare drums.
Yeah, but really, when I do remember when I went in to tell the teacher which one I was choosing, because they did this thing where they laid all the instruments out in the gym and you went around, But I went straight to the drums. There was like no question in my mind. So
right. No, that is fantastic. Okay, so did you grow up a Christian?
Well, yeah, I grew up in a little Methodist, United Methodist church in Hayesville, Kansas, just a suburb of Wichita, Kansas. My mom and dad were both members of the church, and we went, just like as much as you could possibly be there, we were there,
Right.
But I don't know that was the beginning of being a Christian or not. That was being exposed to,
Sure.
what I was being exposed to at the United Methodist Church. And now that's a whole interesting story in and of itself if you want to hear it.
I do, absolutely.
Well, I'll try to tell the mercifully brief version.
Oh, no, don't worry about that. We will make this 2 episodes if we have to. You tell all the stories you want to tell.
Okay. Well, the semi-brief version is that, during that time in my church, I can't say that I was being exposed to the actual gospel story,
right?
Of Jesus and what he did and how he redeemed us and saved us. And so there really wasn't an invitation to become a Christian in that environment. Now, that's not to say that it wasn't very scriptural based and doing massively good things in the community.
Sure.
And, it was a really cool little Methodist church that was, really solid in the community, great people. But, you focus on different things in different churches, that's for sure, right?
Right.
But the pastor's wife had a more of a Southern Baptist background, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And so she was in charge of the youth group, and she just kind of naturally did what she naturally grew up with, and that was present the gospel in the way that she knew it from a Southern Baptist foundation.
Wow.
Okay. And which is pretty fundamental stuff.
Yep.
Foundational.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us of my class and era, starting in the elementary school all the way up through junior high and high school, became Christians through this lady named Rosie Smoot.
Wow.
At Hayesville United Methodist Church.
How cool.
I mean, she just never missed an opportunity to say, if this is the night, if this is the moment, might be at youth camp, it might be at church camp, or
wow.
Or just in, the Sunday night youth meeting. She just never missed a moment, and
that's great.
I think eventually most of us all became Christians through her at that church, through her, her invitation and her discipleship. Let's put it that way.
Right. That's remarkable.
So really, really cool lady. Yeah.
God bless Rosie Smoot. What a great story.
And that church connection really is a big part of my story, because about 5th grade, I started taking not just drum, snare drum lessons, okay, but
Right.
I had a drum teacher there in Wichita at a music store that started introducing the drum kit, drum set. And he was excellent. He was great. Gosh, you talk about hitting the gold mine with a teacher, teaching you to read, exposing you to all different styles, and making sure you were fundamentally sound, and that you knew what charts looked like, and you knew the job that a drummer had.
Right.
Which we won't go into that, but where that connected with my church was they started what they called a celebration group that played while people were coming into the auditorium every Sunday morning. And it was basically Rosie, the pastor's wife, playing piano, this girl that was 2 years older than me playing bass guitar, me playing drums, and then another girl playing flute. She was covering melody most of the time, on flute.
Right.
But you know what? That little thing put me actually playing and rehearsing every week for years and years.
That is awesome.
And not only that, but understanding how to play in that environment and not be the loudest thing in the room. There's all kinds of musical things that came along with that. And on top of that, Rosie was really good. So it was a good little group. And I started doing that in 5th grade. And gosh, I even think about that now in this day and age. Who gets to do that? Who gets exposed?
Right.
And she was just buying books off the shelf. Like back in that time, it would be the Archers or Bill Gaither or, Ralph Carmichael, or just any number of that early, Christian music that was coming out of California and Nashville.
Sure.
But we were just reading it right off the page, making it a rhythm section kind of thing.
In the Methodist church on a Sunday morning.
In this little Methodist church, yeah.
That is remarkable, because I wouldn't, in the mid 70s, I wouldn't put drums in Methodist church on a Sunday morning together.
Oh, this was late 60s.
Late 60s. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. No, this is like 5th grade for me. 6th grade.
Even more remarkable.
Oh yeah, this is late 60s when all the chaos all over the world was going on, especially here in the States,
Right.
But no, I didn't grow up not knowing any different.
Wow.
I just played in church all the time.
Well, it really speaks to someone giving you an opportunity.
Oh yeah.
That is so fascinating.
So that was really the beginning of, getting to play and being exposed to Christian music.
Right. I assume not just playing it off paper, but you listen to the albums as well?
Oh yeah. That was our reference material. Yeah. We'd walk into rehearsal and put the song on if there was a recording of it, and do the best we could to copy what they were doing. And
right. Well, you were part of the first live band I ever saw that made me want to play Christian music, and it's so fun for me hearing who you listened to, and who you played along and practiced to, and who inspired you along the way.
That group, that little celebration group, spawned another group in the church that we called the New Mind. How about that?
Right.
And this was like early 70s, about 1969, 70. We started that little group out of that church. And that was like 4 singers, not really singing 4-part quartet harmony, but 4 singers, 2 guys, 2 girls.
Sure.
And with the rhythm section. And we'd go out to other churches. So
that's awesome.
Man, we were hauling gear and sound systems when I was in junior high.
Man, that is crazy. So you got bit really early by the travel bug.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so then at what point did you get exposed or hear about Roger Breland and Truth? How old were you then?
I had to be no younger than a senior in high school, probably 1974.
Wow, okay.
But I really heard about them in 1975 because I went to a concert, a Truth concert there in Wichita, Kansas, at Emmanuel Baptist Church. If anybody's listening. And it was absolutely, without a doubt, the thing that just set my heart on fire.
Oh, wow.
It was like the sea had opened up.
Mm,
Now I was already into like all the horn bands by then.
sure.
I mean, I was a huge Earth, Wind, and Fire fan.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember the band Chase.
Yeah. Yep.
You know that they didn't get to move on because they had an accident, and then you know all the I was starting to get into Maynard Ferguson, his big band.
Mm,
Of course, that was kind of a more of a pop vibe too. And of course, Kool and the Gang had horns, and I was a horn guy.
right.
Rhythm section with brass just set me on fire all the time. Whoever was doing that. Brazil '66, Sergio Mendes and Brazil '66.
Right.
And a lot of that stuff was introduced to me by my teacher. You know, that was just a club musician in Wichita.
Right.
But he was into all that stuff too. So I just gravitated towards these horn bands. And plus, you know, from a drummer's perspective, a lot of what you do behind a drum kit is set up a brass lick.
Right.
You know, I mean, your job is to make it so obvious that here comes that figure, you know?
Yep.
And he taught me to do that in a way that left no doubt. Here it is. You're going to play this figure, right? Because I just set it up, you know?
Yeah.
Which is really cool. That's a cool thing to learn really early as a drummer,
Right.
especially if you're listening to brass groups, you know. But anyway, Truth, Roger was there that night, which wasn't always the case. But back in 1975, Roger was pretty much at all the concerts,
Yeah.
from what I understood. You know, it was the coolest thing ever, man. I mean, they had a screaming lead player. I think it was Brubaker. I think it was.
I think it was too.
And I remember Bob Nickerson was playing drums, and he had this massive kid up on stage there at the church, in a church that probably never had a drum kit on stage ever.
Right.
It's history. And, you know, all these great singers in the rhythm section. You know, Eddie Anders was up there playing keys, you know.
Yep.
And it was just so tight and so beautiful, man. The arrangements were killer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember sitting there in 1975 going, you know, I really want to do this. I don't know how in the world you get the chance to do this, but I want to do this.
That's great.
Just that compulsion, you know, that God does in your heart sometimes.
So how did you get the chance?
Well, the first thing I did in college was I started going out with Continental singers in the summertime.
Okay.
And so I went on a Continental tour right at my freshman year, after my freshman year, with a couple other people from Friends University there in Wichita. Flew to LA with my drum kit for the first time, and there we were at rehearsal camp at Azusa Pacific College.
Wow.
And so I kept going back, but after my first year, I don't know. I think I kind of got flagged as a player, you know, or in a good way.
Right.
and so I made the orchestra tour immediately and went back on the orchestra tour twice. But the interesting thing about the opportunity is that the orchestra would go to Estes Park and be the pit orchestra, you know, at that Christian artist seminar in the Rockies back in that day.
Yep.
And so by being there and rehearsing the charts, because that's when all the arrangers for the artists would bring their songs in chart form for the orchestra to play.
Yeah.
And you'd back up the artist. You know, you might be Sandy, it could be anybody.
Right.
You know?
For sure.
So I actually got to play and back up a bunch of people in the Christian music scene at the time that I would have never even met or had an opportunity. And I can't even say that I really met them, but that opportunity kind of, you know, you became a familiar face. Let's put it that way.
Right.
I became one of those people that should something open up, I might be, you know, a good call.
Yeah.
Just from experience level and, you know, whatever you want to call it. And which kind of, I'll take a sidebar here. I mean, exposure back then was everything. I mean, you just couldn't move on with your dream if you weren't on the list. Does that make sense? You know,
no internet, no cell phones.
Yeah, you had to have some way to have exposure, and Estes Park did that for me, and that let's hang your hat on Estes Park here for just a second, because that's another big part of my story. So Estes Park happened for those 2 years with the orchestra tour. And both times I was there, I saw Truth at Estes Park. So they kind of knew me from there.
Right.
As the Continental Orchestra drummer. And, I'm not going to lie. I was, there was a gift there. I could play,
Right. Yep.
And I don't say that with any vanity whatsoever.
Right.
But I worked hard. I practiced hard, and I was serious. And I was, being taught how to listen to other players, and I just had it going, which was a part of what I was supposed to be doing. That's the bottom line. But
yeah.
So anyway, Roger and them asked me to audition right after I got out of college from that Estes Park exposure.
Okay.
Roger called in December of the year I was teaching school.
Oh, wow. No way.
And he said, "Hey man, why don't you come up to Kansas City and audition for us, and let's see what happens." That's all he said. Okay. Let's take a look at you. Or listen. Well, and really take a look and a listen, right?
Right.
Which was perfectly fine, because Roger is always casting Truth
Yep.
to be a certain way, and that's okay.
Yep.
That's what it is.
For sure.
So I drove up to Kansas City on a break, teaching school there, and auditioned. And immediately he called and asked me if I wanted to join them, and he needed me right now.
Oh, right now.
And I said, "Well, I'm in the middle of my contract, my teaching contract. It's my first year as a high school band director."
Right.
And he said, "Well, you got a big decision to make, because we need you now, and then we're going to move on." Of course, back then you can probably hear Roger saying this, right?
Yeah.
But in a way, that's he did need to move on if I wasn't going to be able to do it.
Right.
He had to fill the seat for sure.
Right.
So I almost went, and then at the very last minute, I just called Roger and said, "I just can't, in good conscience, renege on my contract.
Right.
Can't do it. Just cannot do it."
Wow.
These kids, man, they've showed up. They've done what they're supposed to do, and I need to finish my job here.
Yeah.
So I did.
It must have been tough.
And then about 3 months later, he called again. The new guy hadn't worked out, and said, "If you still can come and you want to come join us on June 1st.
Oh, my goodness.
And so I did.
Wow.
I did. I resigned from my teaching position after the year was out.
Wow.
With great disappointment from that community, because we were really on a roll.
Wow.
And it was hard to walk away from that.
Sure. Sure.
Because that's what I'd studied in college. I mean, that's what I thought I was going to be, and there wouldn't have been anything wrong with that.
Right.
That would have been great. But so I met Truth. I can't think now. Oh, I do remember where. I had to fly to Nashville. I had to fly to Nashville on day one. I flew to Nashville, and they picked me up in the van,
Yeah.
and took me back to Great Circle Studio, where they were tracking rhythm section on Truth's next record.
Oh, wow.
And I wish I could tell you which one it was, but this was 1978. So you could probably figure it out if you wanted to.
Right.
I walk in the studio, there's Larry London playing drums.
No way.
On this tracking session. And
oh, my gosh.
Larry immediately took me under his wing, and I watched the whole record being cut.
What a great opportunity.
It was phenomenal. And Larry London actually became a good friend after that.
Oh, that's great.
It just was such a mentor to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody out there knows who Larry London was, but one of Nashville's historically greatest session drummers back in the
Yep.
60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yep.
Actually played on a Journey record, believe it or not.
That's crazy.
They flew him out to play on Raised on Radio, that Journey cut.
Great album.
Which was the first time anybody had ever done that in rock and roll, is bring out a session player from Nashville.
Right.
So that's another story. But anyway, that's how I ended up in Truth, and
wow.
Had every intentions of staying. It immediately was a great experience. I mean, we literally would rehearse all day. long.
Every day.
Take a dinner break and play the show, play the concert.
Day after day.
And I never heard anybody speak to a crowd like Roger Breland.
Yep.
Never.
Never.
I'm telling you, it was a phenomenal thing that he was doing and the opportunities that he was giving, you know, what ended up being hundreds of Truth members, you know.
Right. Well, Truth is the reason you and I are talking today.
Yeah, that's right.
We met because of Truth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So this may be my all-time favorite Truth story. When you told me this, I couldn't believe it. You have to tell everyone, how long were you in Truth, and what was it that led to you leaving when you did?
Well, I was there for I was there for 2.5 months, and no, I did not get thrown out. So, although I might have deserved to get thrown out because, well, we won't go into that. But no, we went back to Estes Park in the first week of August. I let's put the timeline on. I joined June 1st.
Right.
We went to Estes Park to play our set. First or second week of August. It was the first week of August.
Okay.
And the Imperials were there playing. And of course, the expectation that night and the energy
Right.
that was getting ready to happen because the Imperials were going to be there was nothing like I had ever experienced. It was just, I mean, it might as well have been the Beatles.
Right.
Or, you know, in that era, or the Elvis, or, I mean, it was just amazing to me.
Right.
And I really wasn't that familiar with them, except I knew I loved the record No Shortage.
Sure.
You know, and I love the song No Shortage. But I can't say I was like this, you know, rabid fan, you know.
Yep.
So we played our set, and the Imperials closed out the evening with their set, which was everything it was, you know, marketed to be. It was Russ Taff, you know, it was just frighteningly good and so different than anything else and cutting edge. You know.
Magical time.
Oh yeah, and really just the beginning, but they already had such a fan base that it was just, you know, amazing. So, but after the show, the guitar player for the Imperials, a guy named James Holohan at the time, he was the band leader.
Yeah.
He walks up to me and says, "Hey," and really, I mean, like drier than the Sahara Desert. Okay?
I know, James. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm scared of you and I've never met you, you know.
Right.
Like, of course, I'm like 22 years old, you know, and he walks up and says, "Hey, we are looking for a drummer permanently or whatever, you know." And he said, "Would you consider auditioning tonight before we tear down?"
Oh my gosh. No way.
Yeah. And I said, "Well, you know, talk about being taken by surprise, right?"
I can't even imagine.
And I didn't know these people at all, you know.
Right.
And,
Right.
I was really happy where I was, to be honest with you, John. I mean,
Sure.
that group of Kim Noblet and Dave Hart, you know, Dick and Melody Tunney, and
right. Amazing.
Ron Freed playing bass, and Tim Norris was the band leader in Truth. Just, man, what a great group. And Dan Oxley and Donna Oxley. Now they weren't married at the time, but Dan Oxley, you know, probably, if you know, arguably the best lead trumpet player in the country at that time.
Right.
Know? And even now, killer, just absolutely amazing talent.
Right.
So I was really like torn, but I mean, this was a real job too when they told me that, you know, what it paid by the week.
Right.
So I went and asked Roger. I said, "Hey, Mr. Breland, here's what's happened. Do you mind if I audition?"
Oh, wow.
And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "I absolutely mind if you audition." It's absolutely, the answer is no.
Wow.
And so I was like,
crushed.
A little shocked by that, I'll be honest.
Right.
But I walked away, was heading over towards James, and Roger called me back.
Oh, no way.
Like almost immediately.
Wow.
And he said, "You know, Tom, I meant what I said,
Hmm.
but I don't know if I could lay my head down at night
Oh,
if you didn't audition.
oh my goodness.
Something I don't know if that's a direct quote, but
Right.
basically he was saying, I don't want you to do this,
Sure.
which I really appreciated. And we don't want to lose you, which I truly appreciated even more now. But he said, you probably have to go do this audition.
Wow.
You know.
Unbelievable.
Anyway, I went up on that stage behind Mike Kennard's drum kit, which is never easy to play somebody else's drum kit. I don't know if folks out there know that, but
Right.
there's a lot of, everybody has their own personal setup.
Sure. Yep.
So I went up there and auditioned. They said, we're going to play Bread Upon the Water. And then we're going to play Old Buddha, see if you can do a country shuffle.
Wow.
Then we're going to play Good Old Gospel Ship, which is just rock and roll.
Right. Right.
And so I played all three tunes as best as I could with
Sure.
no chart, no real knowledge. They just started playing it. And
no warning.
no warning. I just had to jump in and play what I thought was going to fit.
Right.
And of course, it's pretty obvious what gospel ship is. It's pretty obvious that Buddha is just a shuffle,
Sure.
And Bread Upon the Water was kind of they had a little hippity hop funky groove going with that too. That
Right.
was right in my wheelhouse,
Hmm.
And so Armand asked me to join right after the audition.
No, that night?
Like that night, 5 minutes later,
Oh my God.
Armand said, I'd like you to come join us. I want you to come to Nashville and get on the bus in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And we'll go out with the other drummer for one weekend and see how the whole thing works. And we'll give you a list of songs.
Wow.
And a tape, a cassette tape.
Wow.
And you can be prepared.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what I did.
What an amazing story. Oh my gosh. Well, the thing that strikes me about that is you didn't even have a chance to unpack in truth. You were only there 2.5 months, and God still put you there and used it to slingshot you into your future. That's just remarkable.
Yeah, let me tell you something about that on a more personal level.
Okay.
I came into truth in June, coming off of a divorce.
Oh.
I married Miss Wichita like 1977 when she won. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus here. Don't get me wrong.
No. But things happen to a lot of us when we're younger.
Things happen, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And it just wasn't right. And it was devastating to go through. I had never experienced failure like that in my life. And I was devastated and kind of broken in every way. But that 2.5 months with truth.
Wow. How amazing.
I mean, the people were so great to me, and it was such a discipling kind of time.
Right.
And, you couldn't help but be moved by it because just watching the people respond at the concerts, at a truth concert, was a remarkable thing I had never really seen,
Yeah.
When they gave an invitation, man, people came down. I mean, it was just like that. Roger was just so committed to the real mission of that, not just the music,
Yeah.
And I still appreciate that to this day. But I really needed, the point is, that time was part of my story on purpose.
Wow. How cool.
Because when I came to the Imperials, man, you talk about being thrown to the wolves in Nashville.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Man, there wasn't any of that. No, don't get me wrong. The Imperials environment was very much discipleship, and there was an invitation every night. Sitting there watching Russ preach and David preach, and the things that were being said to an audience, and watching what happened afterwards, was remarkable.
Yeah.
Had I not had that time with truth, I'm pretty sure I couldn't have gone and succeeded in the next thing, because it was a grown-up thing, if you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
The Imperials was a grown-up thing. It was the pressure was there.
Yeah.
The intimidation, you're just constantly in these circumstances that just call for you to step up and be your best every second.
Yep, of every day.
Yeah, man, you just had to be on. There was no making a mistake.
Right. Yep.
And then when you were home,
Mm.
everybody just spread out and went to their various places where they lived with their families and apartments, and you're just sitting there in Nashville by yourself. And
Right.
I just wasn't going to be ready for that without Truth.
Yeah.
There was no way. I had some healing to do.
Yeah.
And in a way, I wish I could have been with Truth longer, because it was still hard.
Yeah.
Coming to Nashville by myself and leaving my family back in Kansas. And, there was another side to what seemed like the biggest, most phenomenal thing that had ever happened to anybody.
Right. Right.
That story is ridiculously cool. If you're anybody that wants to make it doing anything, I mean, you hear that story, you go, well, you know what, man?
Right.
Wow.
Right. Well, I have lived the stark contrast of dealing with real life at home and going out and touring and living the dream. All those concerts you went out and played were probably sold out, correct?
Oh yeah. And then when Omardian started producing, it just got insane. We went from big churches to auditoriums and arenas that were set up for 5,000 or 6,000, and then occasionally
right,
you'd be in the arena and it would be full, 10 or 15 or 17,000 or so, I think was the max. But
okay, so because of the scope and the scale of what the Imperials were doing back then, did the pressure ever get to you guys? You guys were pretty young, the guys in the band. Did you ever sit on the bus or sit in the hotel room and talk about anything? Did it negatively affect you guys, or was it all positive?
Well, that's a great question, really. I'm getting ready to tell you something that's going to sound kind of vain, but it's really not.
Right.
I've never been. I grew up as an athlete,
Yeah.
And as far as junior high and high school goes, I was a good one.
Right.
I was the point guard on my basketball team in high school. So there was always a lot of pressure, and I was just kind of one of those people that I didn't really get nervous, man. I just got my game face on.
Right.
And I still love that. I still love getting my game face on in a project or what I'm doing in the studio here. It's just that extra bit of focus and adrenaline that you need to really finish something strongly,
Right.
So that really doesn't have anything to do with talent. Anybody can, ramp it up.
Yeah.
But I was just never one of those people that got like butterflies. And, that's really why I could go audition for Truth and go audition for the Imperials and not fold like a towel.
Sure.
Was that part of my personality was just, man, number one, I thought, I'm getting to do what God has. This is unbelievable. This is great. I always thought that way. I always thought there was a story,
Right.
And so there's a confidence in that's not in yourself, but just that you're part of the story that you're supposed to be following.
Right. And to that point, when you've put that much time and work into becoming who you become as a musician, then you're just simply prepared for anything.
That's right. Yeah. Michael Jordan says it. He said, they asked him the same question. Did you ever get nervous in the final game of a playoff? And he's like, no, not really, because I was getting ready to go do something that I'd already done 10,000 times in practice.
Right.
So I'm not comparing myself to Michael Jordan. I'm just saying that philosophically, that's kind of the vibe, though.
Yeah.
If you really are dedicated to your craft, then being prepared is just part of it.
Right. I think the great disconnect between musicians that could be great rather than just good is in the preparation. I worked with people that thought you rehearsed until you knew a song. And I would say, no, you rehearse until you can't screw up a song because it's so much a part of you, you don't even have to think about it anymore.
Even now, John, when I sit down and worship as a drummer, I'm 65 years old now, but I get prepared. I mark up the charts with my little hieroglyphics that my little notes that I make to myself.
Yep.
And I put that chart out there, and then I just take a deep breath and I go, okay, you're going to nail this from front to back, period.
Right.
Now, Does that happen 100% of the time? No, but just about 100% of the time. Yeah. I think it's just focus. So no, to answer your question, yeah, there was a lot of pressure on the Imperials bus. And when you got on stage, it was not optional, man. The other guys expected you to play your part. They really did.
Right. Okay, so along with James Holohan, give me some of the other guys that you toured with in the Imperials. Who were some of the other band guys?
To start with, it was James Holohan on guitar. Tom Hemby was actually playing bass.
Okay.
Who's obviously one of the more famous guitar players in the country now.
Right.
A guy named Bill George was playing piano.
Cool.
And, maybe one other keyboard. And then we had another auxiliary keyboard player, a guy named Steve McEllier, who was playing all the synth stuff,
Right.
And back then that meant like organ and clavinet, Rhodes. It was such a classic keyboard setup. It was unbelievable. And of course that evolved as technology did.
Right.
And then it turned into other guys. Tom Hemby moved over to guitar and Jackie Street started playing bass.
Jackie Street.
Which was literally the most phenomenal experience I've ever had as a drummer, was playing with a bass player like Jackie Street.
Right. I have to tell you one Jackie Street story. I'll try to make it short, but it's kind of long, but I'll try to make it short. My last night in Truth, Roger Breland introduced me to Jackie Street. Jackie said, "Hey, give me your phone number. We'll keep in touch." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, right. You're going to call me." And he's like, "No, I will. So I gave him my phone number. He gave me his. And all of a sudden he started calling me. And he would come to Michigan that summer. He was filling in for a friend of his. Well, that friend was Margaret Becker. So Jackie introduced me to Margaret and everybody. It got me an audition, and I ended up getting the Margaret Becker gig. And everything I got to do in Nashville, everything I did in Christian music after I left Truth, was directly because Roger Breland introduced me to Jackie, and he called me, and we became friends. And because of that, everything I got to do in Nashville was directly related to Roger introducing me to Jackie. You remember what he was like when he would call you 11 o'clock at night. "Hey, John, it's Jackie." And then that was the last thing he said.
Just hilarious, dry, gifted beyond imagination.
Hey Rockstar provides digital marketing software and services for your church to generate more interest, create more exposure, and reach more people. Let Hey Rockstar amplify the awesomeness of your ministry. And, as always, Hey Rockstar is a proud sponsor of the Stage Right with John Thorne podcast.
Thank you for listening today. My thanks to Hey Rockstar. My special thanks to Tom Reeves for being my guest. Don't forget, part 2 of my conversation with Tom next Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody.